We now move to questions for the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. May I call Mr Dugbity. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Beattie. At the outset, at the beginning of this question time, I want to pay tribute to Jennifer Fulton following her sad passing last Sunday. Jennifer had a long and successful career, including that of Chief Executive of Ulster Wildlife. She was an exceptional person and will forever be missed. My thoughts and prayers go to Norman, Sarah, Peter, James, the wider family, her friends and colleagues. And I think I speak for everyone in this House that she will leave a powerful legacy, and our thoughts are with everyone after her sad passing. In terms of Mr Beattie's question, I recognise the challenges that the agriculture sector faces, particularly in dealing with volatility in prices and incomes, and also with the weather conditions at present. However, I don't agree with the premise of the report that the farming sector is on the verge of collapse. Whilst I accept there is undoubtedly challenges, and I know those, I believe the outlook is positive for agriculture and that young people and new entrants will continue to be attracted to it. The proposal put forward, which is referenced in his question, in the article for guaranteed farm gate prices is not feasible, and neither would it be contemplated for other sectors of a market economy. It would make our exports uncompetitive, for which a sector dependent on exports would be disastrous. Furthermore, to prevent our domestic production being replaced by imports, controls on economic grounds on food imports from GB, EU and rest of the world would be required, and they would be very controversial, if not actually something without the remit of this Assembly. My department does provide extensive support to the farming sector. Direct income support payments to farmers are around £300 million per year. In addition, CAFRE have provided support to farmers through business development groups, training through farm family key skills, regular press articles, management notes and a number of open events, including slurry management events in early February 2024. In closing, I would like to say that I welcomed attending the event because it's good to hear a difference of views in relation to this, and we do have to have a discussion going forward how we can best support our farming community.
Mr Beattie.
I thank the Minister for his question, which was twofold. One is to disregard the report, and I have to say I'm disappointed that you're disregarding the report. But it is clear that our farmers are under severe pressure, and family farming does need support. But you've already outlined that you're not willing to legislate to require wholesalers and retailers and processors to pay at least the cost of production plus inflation-linked margins beyond that. So how else are you going to be able to protect them or support them in the coming months and years?
Minister.
Mr Beattie, well, I'll be making an oral statement to the Chamber tomorrow in terms of the future of farm support programme here in Northern Ireland, and that work has been going on for the last number of years, and it's important we support our farming community. This is a big week for the farming community with the Balmoral show, and it's important that we do whatever we can to support them. In terms of the issue at hand, and the figures are quite clear in terms of the level of exports that we have here in Northern Ireland. What I wouldn't want to do is making the farm community uncompetitive, and that's my worry, is that this legislation would do that and would inflict what would not be intended but unintended consequences upon them.
Thank
Thank the Minister for his answer, and I want to be identified with his comments in relation to the passing of Jennifer Fulton and be extend sympathy to Norman and the family at this time. Minister, a recent survey from the Rural Support Charity in Cookstown has indicated that an increase in referrals to the charity as a consequence of financial distress. Is there any assurances you can give the farming community in terms of future agricultural funding?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. There's two parts to that, and I'll take the second part first. In terms of future funding, I can't give guarantees about that because that's predicated upon the next government and what funding they provide. But you can be assured to members in this House and wider that I'm making strong representations both to the current and potentially the next government around the funding that needs to be provided here in Northern Ireland, and that's something I will be doing over the days ahead in this week. In terms of mental health, I'm very conscious of this. And within my term as Minister, is coming up to 100 days, I've engaged with lots of different people from the farming community and rural areas. And one thing I do see is a significant issue in terms of mental health and how we can support people, and that's something that I want to pick up in terms of our future rural development policy.
John Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister's attitude towards farmers to date sadly does not fill our farming community with confidence for future family farming sustainability. The issue of TB continues to have a devastating impact on local farms, with some 89,000 beef and dairy cows culled in the last 5 years. What urgent interventions will the Minister take to grapple with this issue, and will he give the assurance to local farmers that he will not cut the much-needed compensation to already distressed farmers?
Minister. I thank the member for his question. He's clearly got his Facebook clip ready, prepared for this. I will answer your question.
Order. Minister be heard.
So I am working with the farm community, and I'm engaging on something I've been doing quite consistently, and I'm very committed to this in my job role. In terms of TB, that's a significant issue for the farm community and also for my department. I bid for funding within my department to be able to continue the compensation rate at 100%, and I receive no funding whatsoever for that. What I'm doing is engaging with officials to see what we can do in terms of going forward around the compensation rate, and I'm also engaging with my new Chief Veterinary Officer in terms of the interventions we can make, because I recognise this is a significant issue for the farm community and I'm determined to act. But what more, I'm also prepared to listen, and listening is something we don't do very much in this place.
John Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Returning, if I may, to the support and income and sustainability theme of the original question, can I point out to the Minister that there's been considerable discussion around the subject of minimum farm gate prices, and can I ask him then what consideration he's given to these and whether or not these would be effective?
Mr.
Thank the member for his question. The majority of Northern Ireland's farm produce is sold outside of Northern Ireland. Artificially increasing farm gate prices would be to the detriment of the competitiveness of agriculture exports to Great Britain, Ireland and to the rest of the world. On the domestic market, higher farm gate prices for Northern Ireland farm produce would encourage retailers and food processors to increase their imports of cheaper produce from overseas. Proposals to put controls on imports in the Farm Welfare Bill are not something DAERA could do or enforce, and it would cause real issues with supply chains. In addition, if farm gate prices are guaranteed to cover the cost of production plus a margin, farm suppliers could increase the cost of their goods, knowing that the government would have to adjust farm gate prices accordingly. Furthermore, the regulation of anti-competitive practice and agreements and the abuse of dominant position in the market are reserved matters. As such, the Northern Ireland Assembly and DAERA has no remit to introduce minimum price legislation on farm gate prices.
Matthew Till.
Thank you, Speaker. Minister, another element of that on-life support report was the reflection that the Going for Growth strategy was not just environmentally hugely destructive, but also worked against small family farms to the advantage of large corporations. Can he confirm that no official in his department is working to deliver outcomes in the Going for Growth strategy, and that is not operative policy?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. I'm very aware of this policy, and it's something I've been looking at in terms of the impact it has upon my department, and I'll be making statements in the weeks and months ahead in terms of the future direction of this policy. There's one thing that is to be clear, that standing here now in terms of Going for Growth, is this something I would have signed off? No.
John Stewart.
Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the coming into force of the Windsor Framework Implementation Regulations 2024, implementation of the requirements of animal health law in Northern Ireland, including those relating to disease prevention, is something that no longer sits within my ministerial responsibilities and now comes under the direction and control of the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. There is a significant list of areas that falls within that. It includes foot and mouth disease, African swine fever, avian influenza, rabies, blue tongue, bovine TB, bovine viral diarrhoea and many more, and I'm happy to lay that list in the library for the member. I'm aware of the concerns he has in relation to this. I believe that I should have direction and control under these areas. I've been engaging with the UK Government around this. The Minister of State, Steve Baker, has informed me his desire is that these regulations only cover internal market and trade issues, and I made it clear that we need to get resolution of this so I can fully answer your questions in relation to this and the other areas I've cited.
Mr. Stewart.
I thank the Minister for his answer and for the update on that, and I'll point individuals to that. Minister, many people like myself, many thousands of people across the country have recreational flocks and are very proud of those and very worried about the impact that avian flu is going to have. And I was just wondering if you'd be able to give even some direction to those small amateur and part-time flock keepers in terms of how they can protect both their flock and the greater wildlife in the area.
Minister.
So as I've outlined, I do not have direction and control over this area, and I've outlined my views and the need to rectify that. In terms of the Department of Agriculture, Rural Affairs, they have full information in relation to this on our departmental website, and the latest update, which was the 7th of February 2024, states that avian influenza is a highly contagious disease caused by influenza type A virus, which affects a wide range of birds. Primary introduction of the virus is normally considered to be through wild bird contact, while secondary outbreaks are normally associated with formite spread of infected material. Whilst with highly pathogenic avian influenza, clinical signs of infection are normally expressed through observation of high mortalities, although other signs may also be observed. In January 2024, it is considered the likelihood of a notifiable avian influenza incursion into poultry during the winter is medium, as winter migrants are continuing to arrive from areas known with known HPAI cases, and environmental conditions are favourable for virus survival. The level of uncertainty is considered high due to the uncertainty around the timing of migration, the known immune status of resident wild birds, and increasing frequency of drift in the area. The impact of an incursion of notifiable HPAI to the poultry industry would be moderate. Overall, the risk of notifiable HPAI incursion in the NI flock is moderate, with high uncertainty, with biosecurity playing a key role in the risk posed to each individual flock. I would state I'm not satisfied with the content of the answer I'm giving you, but that's because it's not at all under my direction and control.
Jim Allister.
Though some of the Minister's powers on this important issue of veterinary medicines has been gazumped under the DUP deal returning to this Assembly by the implementation regulations, he is the Minister of Agriculture. Surely, with that hat, he is making representations on the whole issue of veterinary medicine. So what has he done on that issue since he came to office?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. I'm the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. In terms of the issue of veterinary medicines, I have been making representations to the UK Government. I asked to join the Veterinary Medicines Working Group because I want to be proactive in terms of trying to find solutions in relation to this. This is primarily a matter for the UK Government to negotiate with the EU, but I have been making representations and be very clear there needs to be a veterinary agreement in regards to this.
Paul Free. Minister.
I thank the member for his question. I am keen to immerse myself in the local agricultural show season as much as my diary allows, and have plans to attend at least 6 local shows right across Northern Ireland over the coming months. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend the Ballymoney show this year, as I have already accepted a kind invitation to the Lurgan show, which also occurs on Saturday the 1st of June. I have intention of attending the Ballymena show on Saturday the 15th of June, and I'm very much looking forward to what will be a very enjoyable day.
Mr. Free.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answer. Can I remind the Minister that there's also the Friday night for Ballymoney show, and he'd be made very welcome on the Friday night, which is a social gathering as much as anything. The Minister will be aware of the shop window that these shows are in promoting biodiversity and sustainability, as well as assisting in health and well-being. So will the Minister give a commitment to this House that he can reinstate the funding enjoyed by the previous Minister, Edwin Poots?
Sure.
Thank the member for his question. My diary is challenging on the evening of Friday the 1st of May, but if that's an invite, I will take it up and I will see you there. Okay? Second of all, in terms of the funding, you know the budgetary situation for my department, so I'm working with officials because I'm also trying to meet the compensation rate, for example, in relation to TV. So I've got difficult decisions to make. And what I would say in terms of the show organisers, there's other funding streams I would encourage them to apply for as well.
Salmon Hull.
And I'll be delighted to welcome the Minister to our constituency on the Friday night as well. I believe Hugo Duncan does a great wee set. Can I ask the Minister to outline what other funding avenues may be available to show organisers?
Minister.
Thank you very much. There is significant other funding opportunities available to shows, and just get you the particular answer in relation to that, particularly in relation to the food support, the Northern Ireland Regional Food Programme. It is possible for local show organisations to avail of financial assistance via this avenue, as part of the programme provides funding to support food and drink promotion at regional fairs and exhibitions.
Justin McNulty.
Minister, will you be going to the Newry show or the Armagh show, and when you attend, will you be expressing some empathy with the agricultural sector who feel disproportionately targeted in terms of climate change targets when they witness on a daily basis global multinationals like Amazon and the climate burden they place on society who seem to get off scot-free, but all the pressure is heaped onto farmers?
Minister.
I think he's walked a bit of a distance from the SDLP with that question. Just in terms of shows, I do have a lot of empathy. I have it all the time because I see the people I'm engaging with as friends and colleagues, and I intend to attend the shows in Lurgan, Armagh, Saintfield, Ballymena, Omagh, Castlewellan and hopefully Clocker Valley, and the big show this week of the Balmoral show.
I call Colm Gildery.
Question number 4.
Minister.
The Northern Ireland Environment Agency receives a wide range of complaints in keeping with its hugely varied remit. These complaints can relate to water pollution, protected habitats, impacts from industry and criminal activities, to name a few. The member will be aware of budgetary pressures which do have an impact on any regulator responding to complaints from residents. However, the agency will continue to prioritise its response to complaints from residents and works closely with other stakeholders, such as the local councils, to resolve residents' concerns. I welcome the member's engagement with my officials in resolving concerns from residents in his constituency relating to 2 regulated facilities, and my officials will continue to work with all stakeholders to play our part in helping resolve the residents' concerns.
Mr.
And I thank the Minister for his answer, and thank you for your reference to the residents in the Killishall, Cabra and Granville area are suffering significant ongoing odours as a result of odours emanating from 2 factories, and the agencies are telling them that they are struggling to react quickly enough. In order to protect residents' interests and ensure people can breathe clean air, is it now time to consider a fully independent and fully resourced environmental protection agency?
Minister. I thank the member for his question. It's something I'll respond to in the motion that's coming up after this. There is a need for independent oversight around these issues, and I'm aware of the concerns around that. In regards to any specific residents' concerns, I would encourage the member to continue to engage with myself and officials, and we'll work in relation to those issues in the short term.
Thank you, Minister, for your answers thus far. On the issue of environmental complaints, can the Minister update me on the progress in terms of the Environmental Protection Plan, and if there have been any complaints thus far on failure to adopt?
Minister.
I thank the member for her question. There is a statutory duty to publish the Environmental Improvement Plan, which would act at Northern Ireland's first environment strategy by the 25th of July last year. Thus far, the Office of Environmental Protection has received 2 complaints about the failure to publish. I'm very keen that we adopt and publish this plan, and I've been engaging with executive colleagues to receive approval since March of this year. This plan is relevant to the environment in Northern Ireland, and particularly in relation to Lough Neagh. In the context of the catchment area of Lough Neagh, and something that I will ensure is shared on my departmental website in the time ahead, so people are very conscious of that. There's many aspects in the Environmental Improvement Plan, such as the Nutrient Action Programme and the River Basin Management Plan, are all absolutely key to addressing the issues in regards to Lough Neagh.
I call Mark.
Mr. Speaker, is the Minister aware of any occasions or examples when the Northern Ireland Environment Agency have declined or been unable to respond to environmental complaints made by constituents due to a lack of resources?
Minister.
So obviously the role of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency also sits alongside district councils, particularly in relation to fly tipping. So there's obviously a signposting that needs to occur in relation to that. If there's an issue or examples whereby individuals have raised issues and they haven't got a response from the relevant authority, I would ask the member to bring that to my attention and we can follow that up.
Question 5 was withdrawn after the deadline, so we move to question 6. Liz Kimmins.
Mr. Shea, question 6, please.
Minister.
Again, following the coming into force of the Windsor Framework Implementation Regulations 2024, implementation of the requirements of animal health law in Northern Ireland, including those relating to bovine TB, is something that no longer sits within my ministerial responsibilities and now comes under the direction and control of the Secretary of State of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. I have been doing work in relation to this up until the point where these regulations came into being. I do want to take forward actions in relation to TB, so that's why I also think it's unfair to criticise me around this, because I want to do something around it, but it's not sitting within my area of responsibility. I have been engaging with officials up until the point of these regulations in terms of the interventions that can be taken, and I'm also looking to see what way we can take forward in relation to the compensation rate for Northern Ireland.
Ms. Kimmins.
Thank the Minister for his answer. And just to be clear, there's no criticism in my question, but I do thank him for the update he's provided. The Minister will be aware that the bovine TB rate is almost double what it is in the south of Ireland, which is obviously an issue for many of our constituents. And he mentioned that he is hoping to do some work. So can you give us a wee update on what that package of measures may be and how you expect to see that being brought forward?
Minister.
Yeah, I thank the member for supplementary. No criticism was intended. Apologies. I'm conscious that our rate of infection is approximately 10% here in Northern Ireland, where it's 5% down south, and I'm particularly aware of the issues for an example in Fermanagh. There's a number of interventions that can be taken around this. I'm aware that a wildlife strategy is part of this, and I would want to be making announcements about this in the time ahead, providing the UK government sort out this mess.
Tom Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister so far. And I would like to put on record my sympathies to the Fulton family as well on the death of Mrs. Fulton. Could I follow up on that question just around TB and ask the Minister to confirm, Mr. Speaker, that he has no responsibility whatsoever for policy issues or legislation around animal health, including TB, but that he continues to pay for the issues around TB and animal health? This sounds a hugely depressing situation. I'm asking what he's doing to get responsibility back.
Minister.
So I've been making representations to the UK Government. Minister Steve Baker sent a letter to Minister Steve Baker. Officials have been engaging with the UK Government. There's a list of diseases which are covered as part of this. It's quite a long list, so I will place that on the library so people are aware of this. I don't think the situation is tenable for much longer and it needs to be rectified.
Question 7 is withdrawn. I call Tom Buchanan. Mr. Buchanan's not in his place. I call Colin McGrath, rather. I call Colin McGrath.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. On the 25th of April, I published a joint policy statement alongside ministers in other UK nations. This provided an update on positions where we have reached to aid interoperability and smooth running of the DRS schemes throughout the UK. This update was very much informed by input from stakeholders, which has been undertaken in the last year, and learning from other operational schemes. The DRS implementation date is now October 2027 rather than 2025. I would have preferred that the delay was avoided, particularly as the DRS in Ireland went live in February this year, but I fully understand the complexities of trying to put in place a scheme of this scale and make it interoperable throughout the UK nations and also with the South. Regulations to bring DRS are now being finalised following highly focused and collaborative engagement with industry over the past 12 months. The regulations are currently going through EU and World Trade Organisation notification and timetabled to be laid in Westminster in autumn of this year.
Mr. McGrath.
Thank you very much. Thank the Minister. Can I ask, given that there's a bit of extra time, will there be some engagement that would take place with counterpart ministers in the South to ensure that the schemes are equal so that we can avoid a lot of the confusion of having two different schemes either side of the border?
Minister.
Yeah, so I'm very keen to ensure that there is that interoperability, and my officials are in regular contact with counterparts in Ireland, along with their scheme administrator, to take lessons learned from its experience in setting up its scheme when launched in February. Stakeholders and business representatives from across the island of Ireland have been actively involved in our DRS regulations to identify any avoidable consequences of the two schemes. The schemes will align on the material type and size within scope, but it is important to recognise that they are two separate schemes in different jurisdictions, and measures will be required to prevent fraud between the two schemes, such as separate labelling. I'm quite keen to make sure that they're interoperable, and also have a desire to go down and see the scheme in operation down south.
Mr. Buchanan's not in his place. I call William Irwin.
Speaker.
Mr.
We're making good progress today. Despite having policy and legislation in place to divert resources up the waste hierarchy, too much of our waste ends up in landfill. From households, it's around 23% of all waste, and from businesses, it's even higher. I want to reduce waste generation through effective waste prevention, promoting reuse, repair and redistribution. We must reduce our reliance on landfill as far as possible, not only because it's the right thing to do for our environment, but also to help achieve our challenging targets, in particular that less than 10% of all waste is sent to landfill by 2035. One of the biggest issues is with biodegradable material entering landfill. This material enters landfill and emits methane for decades. To counteract this, my officials are exploring options to divert as much of this material as possible away from landfill sites to treatment methods further up the waste hierarchy. On the 7th of March, I launched a consultation on proposals to improve recycling and divert more waste from landfill. For households, these proposals, if implemented, would see residual waste capacity reduced by 25% at the curbside with a move to 3 weekly collections or smaller receptacles. Details of the consultation are available on the DARE website, and I encourage everyone to respond.
Mr. Irwin.
You can thank the Minister for his response. Given the challenges associated with landfill, and I believe that we create a bigger problem for the future generations by dumping stuff in landfills. We have landfill sites all over Northern Ireland. There has to be, does the Minister not agree, there has to be a better way of disposal of
Minister.
waste?
Totally agree, and I've got a consultation underway in relation to recycling and also be consulting in terms of waste strategy as well. There's quite a lot we need to do around this. There's a cost to councils and also to ratepayers as a result of landfill, and that's why we want to move to a much more sustainable way forward. And I have confidence we're going to do that because the people of Northern Ireland have made great progress in terms of reducing waste and recycling, and I'm very confident about the future.
Paula Braccio.
You outline your plans to increase recycling of waste from business organisations. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. In terms of businesses, there's an awful lot that can be done, and the transposition of the circular economy package into domestic legislation amended by the Waste and Contaminated Land Northern Ireland Order 1997 introduced a range of targets including 65% municipal recycling rate by 2035. This legislation also extended the definition of municipal waste to include waste collected from sources other than households where this waste is similar in nature and composition. This means that around 57,000 businesses, public sector and third sector organisations are now in scope of this revised definition. Stakeholder engagement has been ongoing around this for some time now, and in the current consultation, rethinking our resources, measures for climate action and a circular economy, and includes several proposals for non-household municipal sector. I would like to see the recycling systems in businesses and organisations mirroring that for households. This will mean no matter where you are at work, home, at school or elsewhere in Northern Ireland, recycling will be the same, making it simple for everyone to understand and also to participate in.
Mr.
I've listened to calls for reform of animal welfare in Northern Ireland and carefully considered what is needed to enhance protections for our animals. Whilst I'm determined to bring forward legislation on important animal welfare issues, I am cognizant of the time remaining in this mandate and what can be achieved within the resources available to my department. That being said, I can confirm that over the next 12 months it is my intention to bring forward legislation in several key areas. In terms of our companion animals, alongside the forthcoming public safety rules on XL bully type dogs, I plan to introduce a ban on third-party sale of pups and kittens. In terms of our farmed animals, it is my intention to consult on the introduction of mandatory CCTV in slaughterhouses. Additionally, my officials have been working on the necessary preparations for a legislative consent motion to create specific offences for the abduction of cats and dogs to recognise they are not just merely property. It is my hope that the Assembly will be able to debate this motion later this month.
Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that reply and indeed the range of issues addressed in that reply. Can I ask him more specifically what plans has he, if any, with regard to the introduction of Lucy's Law in Northern Ireland?
Thank the member for his question. I'm conscious that Northern Ireland is the only part of the United Kingdom which is yet to ban the third-party sale of pups and kittens. My officials have been exploring options for regulation of the third-party sale of pups and kittens and are now working at pace on developing options for my consideration. I will carefully consider all options presented to me and then decide on the best option for appropriately regulating third-party sale of pups and kittens in Northern Ireland. Any proposals will, of course, be publicly consulted upon. I'd also like to say that this is not just where I want to end. I have strong ambitions over the time ahead, but I also want to do that in the process of co-design with the relevant stakeholders.
Mr. Allister.
Following the coming into force of the Windsor Framework Implementation Regulations 2024, implementation of the requirements of official controls regulations in Northern Ireland, which includes documentary checks, is something that no longer sits within my ministerial responsibilities and now comes under the direction and control of the Secretary of State of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
We haven't time for a supplementary, unfortunately, so we move to questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, topical, and call Patsy Midlone.
Can I ask if the Minister is aware of the emergence of green algae on Lough Neagh, including about a foot beneath the surface of the water as well?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. I am indeed, and that's why we need to move at pace in relation to the issues around Lough Neagh. I have been continuing to engage and will continue over the time ahead to engage with my executive colleagues on the adoption of an environmental improvement plan for Northern Ireland, because we need to take a strategic approach to this, but we also need to take actions on the ground. And whilst I will continue to want to engage with colleagues to agree this environmental improvement plan for Northern Ireland, there is an urgency around this issue, and I will be making announcements over the weeks ahead.
Mr Malone.
Okay, thank you, Minister, for that. Minister, can you advise if there's any allocated budget at this present stage for Lough Neagh recovery?
Minister.
So I bid for funding around that, resource and capital. I received 1.6 million of capital, but I didn't receive any resource. So the budget allocation to my department was disappointing, but I'm not going to just stop there. What I'm doing is engaging with officials to see how we can reallocate resources within the department so we can put the necessary resources into this area. It won't be all of what I want, because I'll be making significant bids within the monitoring round and also to transformation funding, because this is a key priority for me. We need to invest in turning around the situation around in Lough Neagh, but what I'm going to do within my department is see how we can reprioritise things to ensure that we can give a better future for the people, the users and businesses around Lough Neagh.
Paula Bradshaw.
Mr Speaker. Minister, further to your recent meeting with the Earl of Shaftesbury, can you please update on his position as regards the future management and ownership of Lough Neagh? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank the member for a question. The future management and ownership of Lough Neagh is a long-term issue, and the focus is currently upon short and medium-term interventions, as Patsy McGlone has been questioning me about just recently. I welcome the recently announced engagement by the Lough Neagh Partnership in terms of the Lough Neagh Heritage Resilient Project. This is £244,000 of funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Its envisaged completion date is November 2025. It's a 2-year project which will result in a 10-year plan and will be open to public review and feedback, which will also include an economic appraisal and business plan. The programme will additionally investigate the feasibility of acquiring and transferring ownership of the bed and soil to the public or community ownership. I want to state to this House that whilst I await the outcome of that, my own personal preference as Minister is for community ownership of the loch. I have a strong desire to visit examples of that in Scotland where that's been achieved, which is the Isle of Ulva in May, which was achieved in June 2018 following a community buyout, and it's something I think should be actively explored.
Ms Bradshaw.
Speaker, thank you, Minister. You'll be aware of concerns about the impact of sand extraction. What actions have you taken in response to these concerns? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. I'm very aware of the concerns in relation to the impact of sand extraction on Lough Neagh, and I recently met with officials concerning this issue. In response to that, I've asked for a scientific review to be undertaken in terms of the impact of sand extraction upon the environment. As Minister, I'll be guided by the science and evidence, and it's important that we look at this issue from a scientific perspective. Thank you.
Well, Jim Allister.
Answer to question 12. In response to an AQW 8444, you told me that documentary checks lie under the control of HMRC. Since the Windsor Framework Implementation Regulations do not give the Secretary of State power to direct HMRC, who is directing in respect of documentary checks?
Minister.
Not me.
Mr Allister.
Well, is that the best the Minister can do? Can he not tell us who is controlling documentary checks as opposed to physical checks, which are covered by the 2024 regulations, but not documentary checks? Surely we can't have this vacuum. If they haven't been removed from him or from HMRC, then is that where they still rest?
Minister.
I'm here to answer questions for areas under my ministerial responsibility.
Done.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister give an update, please, on when the Rural Micro Capital Grant Scheme will be open for applications?
Minister.
I'm very keen for it to open as soon as possible. I've been engaging with officials in terms of my budget. I'm very keen that there's an allocation around this and we're able to launch this as soon as possible. I engaged with officials last week and also on the Thursday of the day of the budget, and I'll be doing it again this week, so I want to be able to make an announcement on this because I know there's a number of people wanting to see this to be rolled out.
Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for the answer. The Minister hopefully will be aware how important just this scheme is to rural communities, that is maybe the only available option for them. And it is usually released in October every year. But just can the Minister be more definitive on a timescale for actually getting this open?
Minister.
I'd like to be able to announce the way forward in relation to this by the beginning of June.
Brian Kingston.
Speaker, and the Minister will be aware of the recent letter from the House of Lords Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework regarding the issue of animal veterinary medical supplies to Northern Ireland. And the letter emphasised the need for a swift solution between the UK and the EU in the interest of animal health, food supply chain and ultimately public health. So I know he touched on this earlier, but I wish to ask the Minister what efforts he and his officials are making to help contribute to the resolution of this matter, given that the grace period is due to expire at the end of next year.
Minister.
So I'm very aware of the concerns around this, and it's raised with me regularly. It doesn't fit within my area of responsibility. It's the UK Government and their negotiations with the European Union around that. And we know the protocol in terms of the engagement with the European Union as set out by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. But I stepped forward and volunteered to get involved in the Veterinary Medicines Working Group because I understand the importance of this issue and the importance of resolution. I went to London for a meeting in relation to that. I've had also online meetings. I've engaged with ministers around this. It's important we get a resolution on this, but it has to be mutually agreed. So we need to find something that's durable and mutually agreed. My own personal preference is for a veterinary agreement and alignment between the UK and the EU in relation to this matter. I know others share that opinion as well, others don't. But what we need to do is we need to engage with people, we need to build trust and find solutions.
Kingston.
Well, I thank the Minister for his reply and for his attention to this matter. And the only other comment I would make is I'm sure that particularly those in rural communities would appreciate a written response in due course, perhaps to the DERA committee of his efforts in this matter.
Minister.
It would be difficult for me to provide a written response because it's not my responsibility. I'm happy to write back to the member in terms of what work I've done in relation to this, because I do consider it's important, and I think we need to focus in politics an awful lot upon solutions, and that's what I'm focused upon. Far too many people are focused upon exaggerating problems and not listening. We need to listen and we need to focus upon solutions, and that's what I'm doing day and daily, and I'm enjoying it.
Paul Frey.
Can I ask the Minister, regarding his position on the XL bullies and his breed-specific legislation, what work has the Minister and his department conducted to assuage the concerns of the USPCA and the NSPCA regarding his moves?
Sure.
So I'm aware of the concerns and engaged with the organisation, the USPCA, before I made the announcement here to the Chamber, and I recognise there probably will be a difference of opinion in relation to this. What I was presented with was a public safety issue, and the legislation is presented to me here today. I know what the calls are from the organisations you outlined, is that we should deal with the deed and not the breed, and I'm very keen to engage with them over the time ahead and for them to present proposals for me in terms of how we could legislate for that, how we could make that come into being. As I responded to John Blair, over the time ahead I want to go through a process of co-design in terms of future legislation, and part of that probably will elicit a bit more in terms of how we can actually move beyond what we have at the moment in terms of legislation. So there is a genuine desire to find solutions around this issue.
Mr. Free.
Given the Minister's answer, and I think his answers to this point, in that co-design, will that also include dog owners and dog lovers with regards to XL bullies? And has he and his department noticed any trends or adverse effects by his statement in that House that day?
Minister.
So there has been a continued increase in the number of dogs that have been registered and licensed as being XL bullies. I recognise that that is probably an underestimate in terms of that, because people have to identify voluntarily the breed and have to register it. We're unique here that we have a licensing system in Northern Ireland which allows us to identify that. So I'm aware that the scale of the issue may be vastly underrepresented around this. I would say that the overwhelming majority of people who have XL bullies, I understand, will recognise the public safety issues around this. They may not agree with what I've done around this, but that's why I've done it, for public safety. And we are a nation of dog lovers. We are a nation that cares for our animals, and what we want to do is find a way forward that we provide protection for them. And that's what I want to do in terms of animal welfare. This was a difficult decision. It was really, really hard for me to be able to bring this decision, but I was presented with the legislation I have with me, and you all know the statistics in terms of the amount of people who have been killed or seriously injured as a result of these animals, and that's really, really hard to see the examples of that. So I know that people may not disagree with, or may disagree with me on this, but hopefully they disagree with me from a point of respect in terms of the fact of the evidence that was presented in front of me.
Dan Dodds.
Speaker, and may I associate myself also with the remarks and the sad passing of Jennifer Fulton. I think we were all very shocked to hear of it. Can the Minister update us on the latest on the Forests for the Future programme?
Minister.
And I thank the member for her first part. The Department's reeling after this, and I think especially of Norman. He's grieving the loss, and it's just very, very hard to comprehend, to be honest, and I don't think life's ever going to be the same. In terms of the Forest for the Future, we're currently working through the budget, and I've been looking through what we can allocate towards that. That also aligns in terms of my own ambitions in terms of afforestation and our obligations under the climate change. So I will be able to give a further update in relation to this, because it's something I'm keen to do. There's also an issue in terms of tree planting. Where do we prioritise in relation to that? And my own personal preference is we should be prioritising in catchment areas, particularly relevant to this discussion we've had around Lough Neagh. I was down in Upper Bann, the catchment area, on Friday around Kate's Bridge. I can't remember whose constituency that is, okay. And it was good to see the good work that's being done there with the Rivers Trust in terms of engagement with farmers. But if we encourage more of that tree planting in terms of those catchment areas, I think that's something that could have a real benefit.
Dan Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your answer. I think that this is a really important programme, and one where we can enhance the environment and really do something really quite special. Can the Minister update the House on how much it will cost his department over the next 5 years to meet the climate change targets that have been set by this House? And as the department responsible for the policy, has he had negotiations and conversations with his executive colleagues so that we understand how much this will cost across the whole of government?
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. So I do have lead responsibility for this legislation, but it falls to all ministers in terms of the overall responsibility around that. I'm engaged in a number of bilateral meetings with ministers. I met with the Infrastructure Minister last week around the obligations arising from the climate change legislation and the need to adopt a climate action plan and also carbon budgets. I'll be engaging with the Finance Minister tomorrow in relation to that. This is part of a scoping exercise in terms of what will be needed in terms of the first climate action plan, and that will also elicit the potential costs associated with this. What I would say is there's a cost of inaction around this, and that's where the representations that I will continue to make to the UK Government and any potential replacement for that about the need to make those investments, because by making those investments we can turn Northern Ireland around into be somewhere that can be an attraction for investment and for economic success here in Northern Ireland, but we need the capital and resource funding from the UK Government to allow us to be able to meet these obligations over the time ahead, and it's particularly relevant this week in the week of the Balmoral Show and in terms of future agricultural support, because that's relevant to these issues as well, and the UK Government need to come forward with the level of support we need to be able to support our farmers over the time ahead.
Claire Sugden.
Minister, in a previous answer you outlined your legislative priorities in relation to animal welfare. Have you considered any legislation in relation to improving the powers given to local council in terms of how they approach animal welfare?
Minister.
So just in terms of legislation, the Executive will shortly publish its legislative programme. That will be for this calendar year. So over the next number of years, I have a desire to do other legislation, and it will include primary legislation, hopefully in relation to animal welfare. I think we do need to look at the powers of government and to deal with these issues, and that's something I'm happy to include as part of that.
Sugden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great to hear that, because I think the biggest frustration with animal welfare is how limited councils are in approaching animal welfare cases that are brought to their attention. Is there anything that we can do in the meantime? Because unfortunately there's really horrific cases that are happening, and the answer is we simply can't do anything.
Minister.
So the legislation as it sits does give powers for action in relation to that. I'm going to encourage anyone who's aware of any instance of animal cruelty to report it, to allow for investigation around that, because it's absolutely key that we do that. We have fallen behind in a number of areas, and one we talked about just earlier was around Lucy's Law. That's something I want to bring up to scratch. But what I want to be clear is when we're bringing forward legislation, it's done in partnership with the district councils and with relevant stakeholder organisations, so it's fit for purpose, because what people may want as a policy, it's very difficult sometimes to translate it into legislation, and I don't want to enact legislation that doesn't actually have the teeth that is required.
There's no time for further questions, so we will draw to a conclusion questions to the Minister. We now return to the debate.